bodies were everywhere, burnt, split open, hanging from trees like warning signs. British soldiers kicked down doors, dragged priests out by their necks, and shot them in front of their gods. The palace on fire. Sacred bronzes smashed, looted, dumped in crates like scrap metal. And the Oba the king wasn't a king anymore. He was chained, bleeding, and watching his kingdom die. This wasn't a war. It was a slaughter. They came with guns, fire, and rage. Women were raped inside holy shrines. Children were stabbed just for crying. The walls of Benin ran red, and the air god, the air stank of burning flesh and empire greed. All this because the British wanted palm oil, and when Benin said no, they sent in the monsters. Not soldiers, but demons in boots. This is what they don't teach in schools. The day the British Empire wiped out one of Africa's most powerful kingdoms, not in battle, but in blood and fire. The Benin massacre was not history, it was hell, and this is the story they tried to bury. But we dug it up. Let's go back to where it all began. By the late 1800s, the Kingdom of Benin stood alone, one of the last African kingdoms still holding the line, while Europe carved up the continent like a bloody banquet. At its heart was the Oba, a god king, a ruler who controlled every drop of trade ivory, palm oil, rubber, nothing left Benin without his blessing, and that power, it pissed the British off. They didn't want kings, they wanted contracts. Free trade, they called it, but what they meant was, open your borders or we'll open them for you. In 1892, a British consul named Henry Galway forced the Oba's hand, got him to sign a treaty dripping in lies, a so-called friendship pact that banned slavery and promised trade, but the Oba saw straight through it. He knew it wasn't about peace, it was about power. So he pushed back, closed his gates, ordered his people, no trade with the British, no agents allowed inside Benin. And that was the last straw. To the British, it was defiance. To their merchants, it was war on profit. By 1896, they were sharpening their knives. Men like Ralph Moore were already whispering in the dark. Remove the Oba by any means necessary, even if it means burning the kingdom to the ground. Tensions finally snapped with a so-called peace mission led by Acting Consul General James Robert Phillips of the Niger Coast Protectorate. It was late 1896. Phillips had written to London asking permission to visit Benin City. On paper, it was to talk peace and trade, but between the lines, he made it clear this mission could fund itself. How? By walking away with ivory. But here's the thing, he didn't wait for approval. In December, he packed his bags and moved, marched toward Benin with an unarmed party, 9 British officers and civilians, including consular staff and 2 trading agents. Behind them, about 250 African carriers and servants meant to make it look like a peaceful caravan. But everyone knew what it really was. Phillips had sent a message ahead to the Oba, claiming the mission was friendly, but the timing couldn't have been worse. The Oba replied that it was Igwe season Benin's sacred festival. During this time, no foreigner could step into the city. Period. He asked Phillips to wait. Chiefs begged him to stop. Even Itsekiri traders, people who did business on both sides, warned him. This visit would break every law of the kingdom. But Phillips didn't care. He pushed forward, dead set on enforcing the treaty and secretly scoping out Benin's defenses, just in case it came to war. January 4th, 1897, the road to Benin turned red. Phillips and his column were just outside Ugbain village, near Guato, closing in on the city when everything went silent. Then, chaos. Edo warriors, hidden in the bush, struck with brutal precision. Spears flew, gunfire cracked. It was an ambush, but not by the Oba's order. No royal decree, just warriors defending sacred ground during the holiest time of the year. Igwe Festival, no outsiders allowed, especially not a marching foreign party led by a man who had ignored every warning. Phillips and nearly his entire group were wiped out. British officers fell, African carriers were slaughtered, the whole mission gone in minutes. Only 2 Britons made it out alive, Captain Alan Boysragan and Ralph Locke, both torn apart but still breathing. One man, J.A. Lyon, had stayed back at the coast. Pure luck. It saved his life. The news hit London like a thunderclap. Benin massacre, the papers screamed. A peaceful British mission wiped out. The outrage was instant. The Empire smelled blood. Officials didn't just want justice, they wanted conquest. They called Benin savage, cited rumors of human sacrifice, claimed the city needed to be civilized. One officer wrote coldly, "White men cannot be killed with impunity. A severe lesson must be taught." But here's the truth. The Oba hadn't called for blood. He had warned them, told them not to come. It was fear among chiefs, fear that the British were coming to dethrone their king. So they struck first, took the fight into their own hands to protect the Oba and the sacred rituals. Didn't matter. By mid-January, the decision was made. The British Empire was coming back with guns, warships, and revenge. On January 12, 1897, barely days after Phillips's blood soaked the forest floor, Rear Admiral Sir Harry Rawson was handed the order, burn Benin to the ground, drag the Oba out, make the kingdom choke on its own ashes. By early February, Rawson had built a monster, 1,200 men, Royal Marines, British sailors, African troops under British command, modern guns, artillery, and the deadliest tool of Empire Maxim machine guns that spat bullets like rain. They split into 3 war columns, Maine, Sapoba, and Guato. Each one took a different road, but they had one mission, meet in Benin City, leave nothing standing. Gunboats prowled the rivers, HMS Philomel, HMS Phoebe, floating cannons that could level a village from miles away. And on February 9th, the invasion began. What followed was 10 days of pure colonial terror. The British didn't just march, they torched their way through thick jungle and ancient villages. Edo warriors fought like hell, muskets, arrows, spears. Some fought commando style, hit and run, hiding in the bush, bleeding the columns one skirmish at a time. But they were fighting ghosts with sticks. The British had machine guns, rockets, firepower straight out of hell, and they used it. Villages were burned just to make a point. Homes, shrines, entire towns wiped clean from the map. British and African troops killed anything that looked like resistance. One account said, dead and mutilated bodies were everywhere. Whether those scenes were real or staged didn't matter. The message landed, this is what happens when you touch the Empire. The Guato column passed through Ugbein again. Same trail Phillips had taken, same path to death. They found bones, heads, rotting flesh. The remains of the so-called peace mission, now just skulls in the dirt. And yet Benin still fought back. But it wasn't enough. By February 18th, the British kicked through the last defences and stormed Benin City. The final holdouts were crushed in skirmishes around the Oba's palace. And when the dust cleared, they planted the Union Jack right in the heart of the kingdom. The City of Blood, they called it. 8 British dead, 8. How many Edo lives were lost? No one counted. Because to the Empire, black bodies didn't matter. Eyewitnesses said the dead were untold. Too many to bury, too many to mourn. In just a few weeks, an ancient African kingdom had been shattered by steel and greed. What stood for centuries was flattened by gunpowder and a lie. The war was over, but the real punishment had just begun. In the wake of their victory, British forces unleashed hell on Benin City, not just as conquerors, but as executioners. They didn't just take the kingdom, they scorched it. On Sunday, February 21st, 1897, they lit the match. The great royal palace home to centuries of Oba kings was torched, burned to rubble. Alongside it, the compounds of high-ranking chiefs, sacred homes, religious shrines, all wiped off the earth like they never existed. British soldiers moved through the ruins like scavengers, and what they claimed they found was pure nightmare. Rotting corpses, limbs, heads, ritual pits filled with bodies. Some even claimed they saw crucified remains swinging from trees. Reporters said the city reeked of human blood, that the Oba had ordered last-minute sacrifices, hoping to appease the gods and stop the invasion. But modern scholars like Professor Robin Law urge caution. These discoveries were suspiciously perfect for the Empire's script. The more monstrous they painted Benin, the easier it was to sell their invasion as a civilizing mission. But make no mistake, the blood didn't stop them. Because now came the looting. The British ransacked Benin like a tomb. Inside the palace, sacred altars were desecrated, royal treasures ripped from shrines, statues, sculptures, carved ivory tusks, brass heads, over 1,000 bronze plaques, once mounted on the Oba's walls, thrown into crates like spoils from a grave robbery. They stole it all. An official tally recorded about 2,500 artifacts, priceless, divine, art that told the story of a kingdom, gone. Soldiers stuffed their bags with whatever they could carry. Bronze leopards, royal hip ornaments, coral regalia, Benin's entire cultural soul hauled away as war trophies. And to make sure the mission paid for itself, the British Admiralty shipped the loot back to London and auctioned it off. Within months, the Benin bronzes were scattered across the world. 40% went straight to the British Museum. The rest, split between military units, private collectors, and museums across Europe and America. Art that once belonged to gods now sat behind glass, tagged with price stickers. Ironically, the artistry stunned the West. Critics and curators couldn't believe that such precision, such craftsmanship came from savages. The Benin bronzes didn't just challenge their racism, they humiliated it. But none of that changed what happened. The city burned, the culture was stripped, and the wounds of that looting, they're still bleeding today. While the city burned and treasures vanished overseas, the Oba was on the run. Oba Ovonramwen had fled before the British entered Benin. He wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of dragging a chained king through the streets. For months, he vanished into the bush, slipping through the fingers of the Empire, refusing to be paraded like a trophy. But in the end, he knew the fight was over. By August 1897, with his kingdom shattered and his gods silenced, the Oba surrendered. He handed himself over to British consul Ralph Moore. There was no grand trial, just a hollow inquiry, a rubber-stamped blame for Philips's death. And with that, the last Oba of an independent Benin was officially dethroned. In September, they sent him into exile far from his throne, far from his ancestors, far from the city he once ruled. The British dumped Ovonramwen in Calabar, southeast Nigeria, with 2 of his wives, and there he stayed. A king without a crown, a prisoner in plain clothes. He died in January 1914. Ironically, that same year British authorities allowed his son to return to Benin City. He was crowned Oba Eweka Sew, but it was just a title now ceremonial, symbolic, a kingdom in name only. There's a photo, Ovonramwen in British custody, sitting aboard a protectorate vessel, staring into exile. That image is the last breath of a kingdom. With the Oba gone, Britain moved quickly. Benin was officially erased, absorbed into the Niger Coast Protectorate, then into southern Nigeria, then into the British colonial machine. To keep control, they installed a British resident in the city. The old system, Benin's ancient power structures, was ripped out. 6 high-ranking chiefs, believed to be linked to Philips's ambush, were dragged to the public square and hanged, just like that. A message written in blood. Others were jailed, silenced, or stripped of power. The British claimed it was for progress, that they were freeing slaves, ending human sacrifice, delivering civilization. But what they brought was chains of another kind. Forced labor, crushing taxes, oppression wrapped in a British flag. What ended in 1897 wasn't just a war, it was extinction. A kingdom that had stood for centuries wiped out in weeks. And West Africa would never be the same. For years, the only voice the world heard was Britain's. The story of the Benin massacre, the ambush, the invasion, the destruction, was told by the same men who pulled the trigger. British officers wrote the history, and they wrote it in blood. Captain Alan Maxwell Boys-Ragan, one of only 2 survivors from the ambush, published a book later that same year, The Benin Massacre. It read like a horror story. Phillips's death, Benin's resistance, and the so-called savagery of the kingdom. He called it the City of Blood. But that phrase wasn't his. It came from Captain H.L. Galway, the man who had negotiated the 1892 treaty. Galway once claimed falsely that he had seen hundreds of dead bodies in Benin. No proof, no photos, just words. That lie became the headline. British newspapers repeated it endlessly in 1897. They made Benin out to be hell on earth, a place of blood rituals and chaos. And in doing so, they turned the invasion into a holy mission, a righteous crusade, civilization marching against savagery. But decades later, historians started digging deeper, and what they found was greed. Scholars like Philippe Igbafe exposed the truth. This was never about saving lives. It was about controlling trade, taking the Niger Delta, crushing any African kingdom bold enough to stand its ground. Yes, the British condemned human sacrifice, but only after the cannons fired. Before the invasion, their letters and reports were crystal clear. The Oba is in the way. Remove him. Phillips himself had pushed for military action long before his so-called peace mission. He was certain the Edo wouldn't fight, that they'd fold. He was dead wrong. And that mistake gave Britain the excuse it needed to do what it had already planned. The massacre didn't cause the conquest, it justified it. Because in the end, this wasn't about savagery or sacrifice, it was about empire. And Benin was simply in the way. In Nigeria, the fall of Benin in 1897 is more than history, it's a scar. A wound that never fully closed. A reminder of what colonialism really meant. To this day, it stands as one of the darkest symbols of imperial violence. Not just for the blood that was spilled, but for what was stolen. The Benin bronzes, those sacred, intricate masterpieces, became trophies in European museums, centerpieces in halls that never knew their meaning. And their presence overseas still stings, still sparks outrage. Since the mid-20th century, after Nigeria gained independence, the calls have been loud and clear. Bring them back. The Edo people have demanded it. Nigerian leaders have petitioned for it. And while most of the artifacts remain locked behind glass in London, Berlin, and New York, a few like an ornate brass cockerel have been returned in recent years. It's something, but not enough. Still, amid all the ruin, one thing survived, the bloodline. Oba Ovonramwen's grandson, Akinzu II, reclaimed a few ceremonial artifacts from the British in 1938, his grandfather's coral regalia among them, and worked to revive some of the lost traditions of Benin's royal court. Today, the Oba of Benin still holds a respected role. Not political, not military, but cultural, symbolic, a living link to a kingdom that refused to die quietly. And in Benin City, the people have not forgotten. They carry the memory like fire, they honor their past, they protect what's left, and they still mourn what was taken by the guns, flames, and lies of 1897. Please, subscribe to our channel for more interesting history like this. See you in the next video.